We make protective coatings that could be applied onto a variety of different surfaces. And so basically what that means in non-technical terms is we create chemical coatings that help enable certain products like paper and food packaging to actually work. Because without coatings, those things would just disintegrate.
I have a dream.
With great power comes great responsibility.
I could do this all day.
This is it. Don't get scared now.
They may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom.
Cinderella story out of nowhere.
It's in the hole. That the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Welcome back to Capital Hacking. This is Josh McAllen with the world famous John Edwin.
Hey guys, so this show is incredible that we have for you today. David Zamarin, he's a personal friend of mine for years now, a new friend of Josh's. Myself and other friends of ours have invested in David's company called Detrapel. He was on Shark Tank. All 4 sharks turned around to invest with him, by the way. He also is named in Forbes magazine as top 30 under 30. By the way, he's only 24 years old. So he's got a lot of room still to grow in the top 30 under 30 from Forbes magazine.
He could do it several times.
And one of the things that struck me by our conversation, and this is why I sit with Josh McAllen, this is why I sit with David Zamarin, because there's a quote, and I love it. It says, sit with winners, the conversation will be different. And these are the people that I want to be around.
Well, geez, wow. Let's all take a deep breath. I mean, isn't that a salient reason to invest time, energy, and all the work you and I do with these shows and putting the time out? Obviously, we give up other work and other commitments, but we're really building a mastermind for ourselves, and that we get to be a part of a national mastermind called Capital Hacking. And we call it an audio one because not everybody gets to be with us in person. We don't get to be with them. Someday we'll have a worldwide conference, right? But for right now, it's a digital audio mastermind. And it introduces new thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, you'll get to hear David's story and how he was 15 years old, net profit a month of $25,000. Most adults aren't making $25,000 a month. This kid was 15. He exited a business. He sold his business at 15 years old. Started something else he had never gotten into before, nanotechnology. It's well known now, but a lot of people didn't know about nanotechnology when they was 15, 16 years old.
You know, he talks about how entrepreneurs solve problems.
Yeah, that's the truth.
And you want to know what his problem was? I mean, he'll tell you, but I love how it connects to our buddy Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
Air Jordans.
Yeah.
No, anyway, he'll tell you all about that. He's going to tell you how to get on the Shark Tank show.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say he's going to teach you how to get on the Shark Tank show, I mean, he's going to teach you how to get on the. It's amazing what he did for us in this episode.
He was on at 19 years old.
I love this guy. You're going to love it. And sit back. He's going to share details that I have not ever heard this level of detail. He's even going to talk about the difference between venture capital fundraising, which we do not necessarily do. We do real estate fund investing, private equity. He's going to talk about that other type of private deal that people sometimes get introduced to called venture capital or funding a startup. Very good explanation. The guy's really smart, really down to earth. I think you're going to love this episode.
Let's get after it.
We got him here. David Zamarin, welcome to the big show.
Oh, man, I am so excited for this interview. David and I have been friends for years, probably 4 years now. And myself and many of our mutual friends have invested with David. And all right, so let's go. We're gonna fill our audience in on all kinds of stuff. But David, let's talk about you. Just tell us a little bit about your life, and we'll roll from there.
Sounds good, John. That sounds like you're aging me a little bit. 4 years sounds like it was yesterday.
It was for you.
Yeah, it's about to be 4 years in August. Thanks for having me, guys. My name is David Zamarin. I'm a founder of a company called Detrapel, which is an advanced materials company. We make protective coatings that could be applied onto a variety of different surfaces. And so basically what that means in non-technical terms is we create chemical coatings that help enable certain products like paper and food packaging to actually work. Because without coatings, those things would just disintegrate.
I feel like you've practiced that. That was really well done.
Yeah, he articulated that really well. Now, Now, 4 years ago, or just under 4 years, as David pointed out, because we don't want to age him. I think, what are you, 25? Are you 25?
25. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm 25. Yeah.
By the way, it's been more than 4 years because I knew you when you were 20, just before you could drink, even though you don't drink now. But yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, we started conversations before you came to Philly and presented to the GoBundance crew to raise some money.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Our mutual friend David Kane introduced us, and he called me up and he said, "Man, I got a boy wonder here. This guy is crushing it. He was on Shark Tank. All 4 sharks turned around. You got to check out these deck pages." And I said, "This guy's a winner." And that's how we. But take us back to your youth, man, because you were an entrepreneur when you were a teenager. You had an exit. You were crushing it. Like, let's go back to where you were a teenager.
Yeah, it's not all been sunshine and roses, but it's been a linear path somewhat. When I was born to an immigrant family. Both my parents came from overseas, met here when they were really young, in their early 20s, and then had me by the time that my mom was 22. And then, of course, by the time that I was 2, my parents got divorced, so that wasn't great. And my parents had a pretty nasty divorce, still hate each other to this day. But my dad moved out and lived in Bucks County, was always a successful business person, was always involved in real estate and a few other things, was always kind of an entrepreneur. And so that's kind of where I got a lot of the business emphasis. Whereas my mother and I was, because of my parents' divorce, and my mom was working 17-hour shifts in retail. I witnessed a very, very difficult life growing up, and I knew I needed to be independent and financially independent and to eventually help out. Fortunately, I didn't actually have to help out. My parents actually are doing really well off now, which is great. But along the way, I built a lot of this grit that helped me persevere through some of the things that, it takes to be an entrepreneur. But as a young kid, my mom's side of the family, my grandparents specifically, put all the emphasis into me. I was an only child for a very long time. And so eventually, when I was older, my parents and my grandparents in particular always had a huge emphasis on education. My mom's side of the family, though, having a particularly difficult emphasis on education. Like, I always had to go Ivy League as a kid. I always had to do, be the best in my class. And for a long time, it was able to keep up with those expectations. But I kind of lost a lot of passion for where I wanted to go in terms of education later on in life. And what I mean, I'll get into that in a second. But my dad along the way also was inspiring me. I mean, obviously he wanted me to go to school and stuff, but also was pushing business and entrepreneurship. And so I was just really entrepreneurial from a really young age. Like, I remember I was 5 years old living in my grandparents' complex. And I would ask my grandmother to buy like frozen popsicles or make frozen popsicles with me on a hot summer day. And I would go out to, hang out with all my friends it was a huge apartment complex in Northeast Philly. And I would just end up giving them, my grandma thought I was giving them out. I actually ended up selling them for 25 cents a pop. And so I just constantly was always entrepreneurial. I was always motivated to be financially free. And eventually I started my first business, as I call it, which was buying and selling popular headphones, the Beats headphones that Apple now owns. Back then it was by Dr. Dre, and some G-Shock watches. And I sold those at flea markets one summer, I remember. And I was a 5th grader going into 6th grade. And I made like 10 grand in one summer, which for me at the time was like a huge amount of money. I had never seen anything like it. I thought I was on top of the world. And along the course of my middle school years, I actually lost the money in investing into other ideas with my friends. And I also, seeing as my dad was my 50% investor into that Beats and G-Shock business, I actually gave him 50% of the money. But I ended up learned a few lessons along the way. And then as I got into, I was in a really prestigious school in middle school and in high school. I went to Masterman, which is, for those who are not from Philadelphia, it's the top school in the state, one of the top 7 in the country. Public magnet school, you have to test to get in. And I was very fortunate that I was admitted. But when I was admitted into middle school, I was very eager, very studious. And then I applied to the high school, and I got into that as well, which was even far more difficult to get into than the middle school, because you've got like over 1 million kids in the school district, many of which all want to go to Masterman. Only 100 kids per grade are admitted in the high school. And so it's a difficult challenge to get in. And when I got in, I really looked around and I said, I don't know how the hell I got in. Like, I'm studious, sure, but I don't know what makes me special. And I looked at my resume and I was doing 12 different clubs my freshman year. I was really engaged. I was an athlete, still studious, really cared about my grades all throughout college. So, I just looked around and I said, I really want to be different. I don't want to be, when I'm applying to universities, I don't want to look the same on paper. And so I got involved with a youth entrepreneurship program because I was interested in business that was held outside of school. Specifically, it was held at First Round Capital, which is one of the top 10 VCs in the country. And they have a campus, an office space at UPenn's campus. And so I got involved with a nonprofit youth entrepreneurship program that was being housed at First Round. And I did that pretty much for 3 years straight. I was the only one that did it longer than a semester. And I just kept doing it back to back to back because every single semester and every single session we had, which was 2 to 3 times a week, we had new mentors coming in. And I was just building an amazing opportunity for myself as I thought. And so the way I got into Detrapel was in that youth entrepreneurship program, they taught you that entrepreneurship is about solving problems. And for me, my biggest problem as a ninth grader, of course, was that I had bought a pair of Jordans, 2 pairs of Jordans actually, as my presents from my grandparents for getting into Zamarin. And so I really hated getting them dirty because they were so expensive. And I wanted to come up with a film that could be peeled off whenever it got dirty, but I knew nothing about chemistry. And so the mentors actually recommended that I pivot the idea to a shoe cleaning business, which at first I was really not interested in doing because of the pride and didn't want to touch people's dirty shoes. But I did swallow the pride and I actually pivoted the idea to clean and condition and repair local university sports teams' shoes on a bi-weekly basis. So it was a subscription model. I was just involved with sports teams directly and the players. And I would just pick up their shoes on a bi-weekly basis, clean them. Eventually I bought equipment to do that and then I would give them back. And so I ran that for about 6 months and I was making really good money. Actually, my first real business, I'll say, not the one that I was, doing when I was in 5th or 6th grade. And yeah, I ended up turning around and making about $25K a month in revenue at the peak. And it was like 90-something% margins. I was alone in the business. I had, no other employees, no real costs, nothing. And I didn't really have a real labor cost either at the time. I was in high school.
$25,000 a month you were making and almost all profit.
Pretty much. It was by like the 4th month that we hit that revenue mark.
And how old were you?
I was 15.
15 years old. This guy's unbelievable.
Yeah. So I knew nothing. I knew nothing about, what to do with the money. I had no clue. And I got an opportunity. So 6 months into the company, I got an opportunity to sell it to one of the independent reps that I had at the time. It was just the guy who introduced me to all the schools, actually. And he offered to buy the company from me, which to me was like an absolute no-brainer because I wasn't passionate about the business. And the conditioning service that I was trying to offer was the predecessor to what Detrapel is today. I was trying to come up with this film that could be peeled off or never got dirty. And that was the passion that I really wanted to pursue. That was where the vision really was. And so I ended up selling the business. I'm still 15 at this point. It's the summer of my freshman year going into sophomore year. And here I am with 6 figures in cash nearly. It was a small exit. It was a 6-figure exit, but it was over a few years. We struck a licensing deal essentially, a royalty deal essentially, where he was just paying me out over a few years. Damn. And so the cash that I had on hand was, just roughly 6 figures. And I had no idea what to do with that money. And so, of course, I had very strict parents who did not allow me to spend it. And like, for example, I wanted to buy my first car right before I could even drive. And my mom said, absolutely not. And even though I had all the money, I could go out and buy it. I listened. And instead, what I did was I invested it into the idea of, chemistry. And I started looking into protective coatings. This is when I learned about nanotechnology. And the cool thing about Masterman specifically is that, well, there are many cool things about it, but one of the interesting things about Masterman is that you, as a student, you can also take classes as a part-time undergraduate student for full college credit at the University of Pennsylvania during the evenings. So for 3 years, I did my regular course studies. I was an athlete all my entire high school career, both in school and out of school. I'm doing a bunch of clubs, but I also took classes at Penn for 3 years straight. And my first classes started in, I did some chemistry work. I did, economics, so some business, and then one of the classes I did transactional issues in global politics. So it was all over the place, but some of it was thematic in the sense that I had some business coverage and I had some chemistry coverage. And the chemistry coverage also really started because I really wanted to talk to the leading researcher in nanotechnology at the university, which is one of the leading researchers in the world, because they had just built this brand new, beautiful $300 million facility called the Singh Center for Technology, which is currently what Penn uses for nanotech research. And so I shadowed that researcher for a summer, studied all her information, studied all of her findings. And that's how I came up with the original formulation. That's how I came up with the initial idea for what Detrapel is today. Came up with a nanotechnology-based coating that was an evolution of what was currently available in the industry before we even thought about the certain chemicals that are in those types of products today.
Wow. You know what? That's a heck of a story, as a matter of fact. And now I'm here.
A long one.
David, obviously it sounds like you grew up right near where we live. Now you live somewhere else though, right, David? Where are you now?
Yeah, so now I live right outside of Boston.
Boston. All right. So University
Sucks,
of
go
Pennsylvania.
Philly.
Yeah, that's right. Forget about the Eagles. But University of Pennsylvania was the UPenn reference there. What a prestigious. I mean, we're not talking about you got college credit while you were in high school. We're talking about one of the best Ivy League schools in the world. I mean, obviously in the whole Ivy League. So phenomenal education and access. It sounds like you really learned from that access. Now, those are some heady things you just said. So we're going to break it up with some non-heady questions. I'm watching your Shark Tank episode. Okay. And who were the sharks when you were on, just for those listening?
So we had Mark Cuban, we have Lori Grenier, Barbara Corcoran, Robert Hershevek, and we had a guest shark, Rohan Oza.
Okay. So now that's just painted the picture for all of us driving around or treadmilling. You do a great job on that episode. So Google that or go into our notes right now if you'd like to see it. It's the Detrapel episode on Shark Tank, and we will put it in the show notes. Now, let's jump into really complicated questions. I hope everybody's sitting down. This is going to be very complex. I'm watching your episode to prepare for the show here, and you did a great dramatization, right? Where you spill the stuff all over your clothes. It's all about nanotechnology, folks, of course. But you have like actors acting out. You're squirting mustard at them. Really good. How does that,
by the way,
how does that happen?
He convinced somebody to drink the solution too.
No way, right?
Yeah.
So here's my point. Like, that's like a TV quality TV show. Did they do that? Did you hire that actor? This is the question I always want to know. Did they hire that actor? How did you do that presentation with that other person? They're like,
no. So
how does that work?
Yeah. So you bring everyone that is on the show with you. So it's not, they don't provide pretty much anything for you in that way. The person who I had was actually part of the company at the time. I had brought him in to do business development. So he was our biz dev guy, similar to me, in terms of age and everything and aspirations as well. And as a young kid, I always watched Shark Tank. It was a dream of his to go on. And that was the case for me too. So we brought him on and he did a great job. So credit is given where credit is due.
You both did a great job. But okay, so now we've got the very complicated, heady intellectual question done. Let's get to another heady intellectual question. And this is one of my favorite parts about business. How the hell did you get on the show? What angle, what hustle, what grit? That's awesome that you even got on the show. But usually there's a story behind getting on the show or any of those kinds of sales techniques you came up with. How'd you do it?
Yeah, so I think my story is quite unique, actually. I watched the show as a kid. And when I had just started Detrapel, so I started Detrapel in August of 2013, I launched my first MVP product to the market in February of 2014. In January, or maybe it was February of 2014, while I launch, I decide that I'm going to be crazy enough to cold email Mark Cuban. And the reason why I decided that was because part of the youth entrepreneurship program that I was in at First Round Capital, it was held at First Round Capital, I should make that distinction. But there was a partner from that firm who did I think it was a talk on Forbes or something. Anyway, he gave a speech and he talked about how to get a hold of the busiest people that you know.
Damn.
And it was essentially what he was explaining was the perfect way to craft an email. And this is still an article that you can see today. So if anyone listening wants to Google it, please go ahead. It's like the 10 steps to email the busiest people you know, or how to get a hold of the busiest people you know by Chris Fralick, who's a partner at First Round Capital. And it pretty much gives a blueprint on how to email people. So I look at that, I draft an email, and I send it to Josh Koppelman, who is the founder of First Round Capital, who sold Half.com to eBay back in 2004 for $350 million.
Wow.
He responds. So he responds. Now, granted, I kind of knew sorry, actually backtrack. I first emailed Chris Fraley to tell him, hey, I saw your video. I read the article. If you answer this, I know I interpreted your message correctly. He answers it. I go, okay, fine. I'm going to email Josh Koppelman. I email Josh Koppelman. He responds. And then I realized, I kind of have a relationship with First Round because I'm in a program that's held there. So I want to go completely big or go home. So I learned how to data mine at that time, or data hunt, an email hunt specifically, which is just the way of finding anonymous emails and so on and so forth. And I went and found Mark Cuban's email online, and I decided to email him. And so I emailed him this massive story. I'm starry-eyed, so I'm violating some of the rules. I'm not making it brief. I'm writing him a whole novel. But he responds. And in the response email that he offers me, I then reply and I say, like, thank you for responding, blah, blah, blah. By the way, I'm interested in going on the show. And he then ceases communication. You're not allowed to have prior communication with any of the sharks. So he ceases communications and sends my information to the producers, the casting producers, who then reach out to me, send me the application. But I realized that I was really not ready to go on the show. It was way too early. And I pretty much did not apply for, I think it was almost 4 years, roughly 3 to 4 years before the business had matured enough where I felt I was comfortable enough in a place to take it. And so, yeah, they just kind of followed up with me on a yearly basis. And I kept replying and telling them that I'll apply, when I'm ready next year or whatever. And so eventually when we started getting ready to apply, I did apply, finally reached out, and I filled out the application. We got admitted through the first phase. There are multiple phases. It's a very complex process, actually. It was super nerve-wracking. But I applied for the show. I got in through the first stage. And then the second stage, I forget exactly what happens, but there's a part where they're supposed to essentially talk to you, or you have like a soft audition, and they rejected me after that, actually. And I didn't know why. And so this was like the summer of my sophomore year in college, when in the process of applying, or I guess my freshman year going into sophomore year of college. And I actually had a big tragedy. My best friend passed away from home that week, actually, that I got rejected. So I got rejected and my best friend passed away in the same week. So it's like a very horrible time. I ended up driving back to Philly for the summer because I was at school. I was working in the business. So I stayed in school and took classes over the summer too to get housing. And so I ended up coming home. I'm a mess, obviously. And then I get a notification with 1 day notice that there's an open casting call in Boston happening. And I go, I got to make it. So I drive back, and even though they didn't give me a reason as to why they rejected me, I drive back. I go to the in-person presentation. I give my mock pitch. I show it to them, and they're like, okay, you'll hear back from us in 7 to 10 days. 10 days go by, I don't hear anything. So I follow up on the 10th day, and I essentially say, following up on the application, just want to let you guys know, like, these are the updates since my last correspondence with you. And I get a call within 5 minutes from, you have the casting producers, and then you have producers that are assigned to the specific company. And so my specific producers called me, and they said, hi, is this David? I said, yes. Like, this is blah, blah, blah from Shark Tank, casting producers here. And we just want to just call you and apologize because we actually wrongfully rejected you the first time. You were actually initially accepted, but then because you were switching out which personnel are going to be on the show, we actually mistook that as the company was going out of business. So we chose to send you a rejection letter when in reality, we were actually accepted. Wow. So it was this like huge emotional roller coaster. And eventually, we did get on, and it was this whole process. And we eventually did film. So it was very, very, very nerve-wracking.
Wow. What a great story. And so you're on Detrapel. You did an amazing job. You were 19 years old at the time, by the way. Well, you knew that, yeah. But I'm telling our listeners, for the listeners, he was 19. And then when the Sharks started making offers, like what were you thinking in that moment? Because that's an intense moment.
Yeah. So the show is obviously, it's a show, right? So they cut certain things. It's all real. It's authentic, but they cut a lot of the content out. Most episodes, the average episode films for 90 minutes. I didn't know that. And then they cut it down to like 12 minutes on what you see on air. For me, I had one of the quicker episodes in history. Mine was like 35 minutes or something, or 36 minutes. I don't remember exactly. So we had a very quick offer and closing of the deal. So what you don't see in between is all the questions that I'm getting absolutely grilled on But, I'm answering them, we're giving them data, we're giving them financial information, whatever they're asking. And then all of a sudden, I'm getting a question from someone else. Mark interrupts and says, look, I'm going to cut this short. I like you. I'm going to give you an offer. And so Mark was the first one that opened up the door. And I'm thinking, holy shit, this is my dream come true, because Mark is the shark that I want with Lori. I specifically wanted those two when I was going in. And obviously the more sharks in my mind, the better. But, I wanted Mark and Lori specifically. And so I asked Mark, I don't answer his question. I pretty much just say, hey, would you go in on a deal with Lori? And I don't know what the hell I was thinking there, because I was, I don't know what possessed me to have that kind of confidence in the moment, because that was at the time, the most career defining moment I had. And so at the time I was surprised that, I still look back and I was surprised that I was that confident in being able to just turn around and say, would you take a deal with Lori? And so they start debating. They're like, well, we don't know. Start listening to other questions. And then, next thing I know, another shark is coming in. Robert's giving me an offer. Rohan's giving me an offer. They decide they want to go in together. And then, Mark cuts them off at one point and says, David, what do you need out of the business? Are you looking for help on the technology side, or do you need help on the business front? And that's my answer to the question, which everyone sees on air, that we need help with the business. We need help on marketing, sales, so on and so forth. And that's when he says, okay, I'll go in with Lori in that case. And so at that point, it was kind of a no-brainer for me.
It's amazing. And then, so what happened from that period to moving on to raising money and not partnering with Mark and Lori?
Yeah, so that's a great question. For those that obviously don't know, we did not end up closing the deal after our on-air episode showing that we did. And that's actually the norm. More than 80% of the deals, or 75% of the deals that go on air that say that they have gotten a deal do not actually close. So it's very common. And that's usually because either the company has not disclosed something and not been truthful, so the deal terms change, or the sharks are just, asking for X, Y, and Z, and the company realizes that, we don't need this or whatever. Like, things happen.
Yeah.
So in our case, what ends up happening is we film, then due diligence starts. So the show does their own diligence, but then the sharks, as investors and their investment teams, start doing their own diligence, which is far more in depth. Traditional venture capital like diligence process. And so, we fill out all the information. There's a lot of stuff that's in there, a lot of stuff that's missing. There's a little bit of back and forth. Anyway, long story short, we end up not coming to terms. We end up not coming to an agreement, and we decide to move in separate directions, which is fine. At the time, I thought that was devastating. I didn't really know what was going to happen. And then about a week after that, we got notification that we were going to be airing in the first episode after the new year in January of 2018. And that really changed the life of the company. Airing on the show is what I say took it from being a business to a company, meaning we were actually hiring full-time, real experienced W-2'd employees after that.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. From that point, what was the marketing lift, and how functional was the business at that time? Were there product lines available on internet? What was it?
So prior to us airing, we pretty much did not have really anything available online. I mean, you could buy it online, but we had very little stock. And that was primarily because we were not, how should I say this? We had issues. My whole issue after founding the company for 4 years, the biggest challenge that we had for a long time was R&D. We had come up with, a basic formulation, basic chemistry, and an understanding for how the chemistry works, but we constantly were challenged when scaling it up. So you see these like big tanks behind me. These are, for those that are just listening, I've got multiple 1,000-gallon tanks behind me. There's 5 of them in this facility. Each one's between 1,400 gallons to 2,400 gallons. And so before we were able to make batches of that size at any single time, we had to make them in the lab, and lab scale sizes are like 1 liter or 2 liters or 1 gallon at most. And the chemistry was so unique that it required a unique process to make it, which I was not aware of. I didn't know anything about that. I just knew that the chemistry was very, very unique. And so we just constantly had trouble because I couldn't replicate anything I was doing in a scaled up approach. I had to do everything in the lab. And so that was a big challenge during Shark Tank, because I had to prep for weeks and just make product pretty much by hand. And we were filling by hand. It was bad. It was all semi-automatic equipment. We didn't have a fully automated facility like we do now. And it was It was very difficult. So we weren't selling much prior, but Shark Tank made us really put our pants on and become a real company and really get our shit together. So it was kind of a blessing in disguise, but also the marketing effect, to answer that question, was huge. We had one of the more successful episodes of the season 9 specifically. We ended up getting, I forget what it was, but it was a few $100,000 in sales, like $300,000 in sales on our website alone. This doesn't include Amazon or anything else. Just on our website within like 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
And so it changed the life of the company. We were able to become profitable that year. We grew tremendously and we brought on seasoned people to come work instead of a bunch of college kids. So it became a real business.
Fast forward to today. What is the company doing today in a snapshot? And how much capital have you had to infuse and raise from outside investors from the beginning of time?
That's a great question. Yeah. Yeah. So we're an interesting business. So we've been profitable in multiple years in the company's history. We're in 7 figures in revenue. We've gone close to 7 figures in profit in before. But the point that we have with the company that we're at currently is that, the real business trajectory is this industrial side of what we do. We don't really care about the consumer side of our business, which is what I presented on Shark Tank. The reason why I presented a consumer business was because that's what I had at the time. It was my way of getting into the industry. I needed something to make money. So the first thing we did was create a CPG business. And then from there, we were going to attract industrial clients, carpet manufacturers, paper and food packaging manufacturers, textile manufacturers, upholstery manufacturers, whatever, automotive manufacturers, whatever it may be. And we would develop coatings for those companies for whatever their needs were. And so fast forward to today, the company is like 90% industrial. We create coatings that help enable and functionalize substrates that otherwise don't work. So for example, everything that you can think of, including like the paint varnish on your wooden table, is a coating. Everything is technically a coating. So coatings are a huge multi-trillion-dollar industry, depending on which way you look at it. You can narrow that down a little bit by nanotech coatings, which are nanotechnology-based coatings, which are around like the $56 billion or $60 billion range. And so it's a huge industry. It's coatings are widely used to enable everything from like your iPhone charging cable and the charging port in the actual iPhone, all the way to your food packaging that allows the paper to actually be susceptible against, or not susceptible, but protect against oil and grease stains and so on and so forth. And so those are the coatings that we make today.
So yeah, one of the things that really stuck out, and you definitely weren't in the beginning, but when you were looking to raise money, I think there was a Boston angel group that invested with Detrapel, and then you came and spoke to the local GoBundance group in Philadelphia, and a bunch of us investors jumped in, and it wasn't just coating sneakers, although that's a huge industry, but you were really set apart because of the eco-friendly portion of like that. You're like, are you the only like eco-friendly coating company in the world, or one of the few?
No, we are one of the first that started with PFAS-free specifically. So fluorochemicals or PFAS chemicals are a chain of 5,000 different chemical compounds that are, many of which, almost all of them, are incredibly carcinogenic. They've been used in the industry for over 70 years. They were originally developed as coatings for paint on tanks during World War II that would help repel soil and blood and stuff like that. Eventually, that became nonstick cookware. Your Teflon stick pans, that's PFAS, which was obviously also had a huge ban in the early 2010s. A lot of litigation and regulation has come out against PFAS. Right now, there's a huge emphasis to get out of PFAS in almost every industry. And so we're in a really great spot now because we were the first ones that really came out and said that we were PFAS free before PFAS was even a thing. Like no one even knew what we were doing back then or what PFAS was. And so our challenge is, or not our challenge, what our proposition is, our value is we always lead with performance. So we're the performance leader in coatings in the industry. We give you, if you need the best performing coatings, if you have the highest degree of application, if it's the most difficult project that you have, you come to us. If you're looking for the cheapest product, we're not your company. We're not going to be the cheapest on the block. We are the premium in the industry. But again, in our position, what we really look for is we want to be solving your toughest challenges. And so we're a partner in that sense. We create coatings that are leading the industry in performance, giving you the similar or better performance than what traditional fluorochemicals do, all without sacrificing any sustainability metrics. They are eco-friendly, they are biodegradable, they are, depending which coatings, right, non-toxic and so on and so forth. Like we have everything to be PFAS-free, water-based, we have a very distinct kind of offering, but we lead with performance always. And I didn't answer your fundraising question, but I'm happy to go back to that if you want.
For me, yes, if you could. If you could, I was in general, because, a lot of people on this show, including our accountable equity group and other groups that put together small syndications and funds, we often talk about real assets and we invest against a piece of real estate or collateral. Your model of raising capital is more of, it's obviously business related, intellectual property, future valuation structures. Honestly, we've never had anyone do a good job of explaining that type of fundraising. And they call it, different rounds. There's a whole bunch of jargon that's used in the world that you're in, which is business funding and startup capital, or venture capital. Now that's not really used in the real estate world. And I know you understand the real estate world. I know you're a real estate investor. So why don't you give us a 3-minute tutorial on the difference? Like, what is it like to raise capital for your company, and what have been the rounds, and how did you find investors?
Yeah, it's hugely different. Traditional, I would even say business funding is even different than venture capital funding. When I think of business funding, I'm thinking of, huge interest rates or commercial interest rates. So you're getting a commercial line of credit from a bank or from like someone doing a purchase order financing or something like that. That's not the same as venture capital at all. And there are stages of venture capital. Before you get to venture capital, typically companies go to angel investors, which are individuals like John, for example, who invested into Detrapel, 4 years ago. 4 years? 4.5.
Yeah. Okay.
Wow.
Somewhere in there.
Oh my God, it's getting
I was going to say you're a young guy, but you're still a young guy.
Yeah. But no, so we end up in the venture world. What we end up doing, most startups, is, and it depends. You can run your business in different ways. I was very conservative in the sense that most venture capital that you hear of, like the WeWorks of the world, that have billions of dollars of funding from SoftBank or some other huge venture capital fund like Sequoia or something like that. Those funds or those companies, there's a saying, they can fundraise to die. And that is just companies that are constantly just propagating their valuation, raising more funds, and just constantly looking to exit. But by the time that they exit, they own, like the founders may own maybe a collective 10 to 20% of the company at most. And so I don't necessarily subscribe to that methodology. It's not the way I like to run this business. I just have grander visions. We want to also exit for huge numbers, and I don't want to exit for 10% of 10% of $1 billion is nice, but I definitely want to be higher. And so the reality is, for us, what we did is we prolonged it as long as possible, and not everyone's able to do that, which is why I always recommend getting started as young as possible, because the sooner you can start, the more excuses you have to fail or learn. And in my scenario, I think our first round of capital was our pre-seed round, which is one of the jargons that you could use. There's names to these rounds, and there's really nothing special to the naming conventions. But the pre-seed round was a $100,000 round at $1 million valuation. So I sold 10% of the company's stock at the time in exchange for $100,000. And I did that in 2017, a month before going on Shark Tank. The reason I did that, because $100,000 really didn't get me anywhere, it did two things for me. It, one, allowed me to buy inventory because I needed inventory to sell the product on Shark Tank. And two, I needed to peg a valuation to the company so that when I got into the tank, the sharks wouldn't eat me alive. And so that was the main reason I did that. The next time we raised capital and actually closed, obviously Shark Tank was raising capital, but that didn't close. The next time we raised capital was in 2019. So I guess it's been almost 3 years, John, actually. We're not dating ourselves too much. It was in 2019 at the summer, in August of 2019, where we did our seed round of financing, which was $1 million raise. And this time around, we gave a little bit higher percentage of the company, which is very standard. Usually you give about 20% to 20 to 25, sometimes 30%, depending on the startup per round. So you can start to see how people get diluted quickly. But for those that don't understand, just because you do 3 rounds at 30% doesn't mean that you only have 10% of the company. You're diluting 30% of what you own at the time. So it does change. And then a lot of times investors, in terms of performance compensation, once you have institutional capital involved, your performance compensation becomes more shares and so on and so forth. So, it's not necessarily always linear. But we raised a seed round and, did another pretty standard 20% raise pre-money. So post-money was actually less. And so, it was post-money that we did 20%. And so we raised $1 million at a $5 million valuation based on those mathematics. And then just recently, Another 3 years later, we just closed on our $7 million round. We actually we're electing to raise an additional 1.5 for a total of 7. So we're raising 7 total. It's a 7 million in a Series A. We've already closed 5.5. And the valuation's at 24 million post money. So the valuation is the value of the company. If the company was bought today arbitrarily, that's what we would be selling at. Or I guess if the investors were buying it at 100%, that's the number that they valued the company at today. But valuation for early stage companies, the big thing, and this is what's so different about, like a traditional real estate investment, you don't do discount and cash flow analysis. You don't do, a revenue or an EBITDA. It's very different. It's not like a publicly traded company. It's a lot of the times it's more of an art than a science. It's about how you feel and how does the investor feel and how can you meet in the middle. And so that's the hidden secret behind fundraising venture capital, is that it's not always a science. There are definitely methods that are used, but generally speaking, it depends on how much you're raising and how much of the fund that you're raising from want to own of the company. They have some kind of call out in their fund details.
There's so much I could ask you, but I don't know how to even craft all the questions because there's so many nuances in what you said. But one of the things I'll take away forever is that comment about each time you raise, it's typically 20% of the existing company at that time, and you're targeting a value because you need to peg a value. So you're saying we're raising 20% at a valuation of $5 million, which means that we're raising a $1 million in cash, correct? And that 20%, if you did a whole bunch of 20% in a row, doesn't actually ever get to 100% of the company. It's not like 20%. Right.
Exactly. And no investor wants that because you want to keep your management and your founding team, if they're important to the company, engaged.
And what is that ratio that you've heard from? So you've worked at some places or you've been around first round. What is that magic number that a VC group wants to see the founder stay at? Because they don't want to take it away.
Yeah, it depends per round. So I can tell you, for example, in a Series A, it's very uncommon to be in a position we're in, or I guess, it depends. Like every company is different and every industry is different. In the material space, it's very uncommon to be at 50% ownership with founders at a Series A stage. That's highly uncommon. Most founders are at that 25 to 35% range after a Series A. And that just depends on how you raise the company. If you have co-founders, stuff like that. So it's fully dependent.
So we're just going to do it in a one bullet list. It's angel investor. Then what does it get to get to Series A? Just do it like in a line for us newbies.
So there's and you can, nowadays it gets even more complex because now there's pre-seed, which is what we did. There's a seed, then there's a seed 2 or a seed B. And now there's pre-Series A, there's Series A, there's Series A1, Series A2. It gets crazy. And it can go it goes all the way to E, F, G, H, whatever you want, right? So until you go public or sell the company. The one caveat though is it's not 20% usually, or 20 to 30% of the company after the Series A. After the Series A, once you've hit Series B, which are if we raise a Series B, we'd be raising over $30 million probably. But that's a good example of a situation where we would not be giving away 20% of the company. And the later stages you get, the less you give away.
And I'll stop here, John. Series A is the magic waterline. There's a certain meaning to that. So for us who've never done one of these, that's the watershed thing that seems to change. What does it mean, Series A, and what is the pivot there? Why does it change after that?
What generally happens is this is when Series A is generally when you have your first, and this is changing now, this is starting to change quite a bit, but it's generally when you have your first institutional capital. And getting institutional capital, like venture capital funds, changes the game entirely. Now you have
I get it.
formal board structures, everything.
Man, yeah, David. So this has been such an awesome episode. What's exciting you right now? Like, what are you guys working on right now? And also kind of like give us an idea of the next year, couple years of something that you're excited about working on.
Yeah. So right now we're working on, like I mentioned a couple of times, the paper packaging coatings that we have. And honestly, those are phenomenal. From a performance perspective, I'll give you like an example. If you take a regular piece of tissue paper and you throw it underwater, it'll disintegrate, right? So when your food packaging has oil and salad or balsamic vinegar, whatever, when it has food in it, why doesn't that fall apart when it's a paper container specifically, like a takeout container that's paper? The reason is because it's either lined with fluorochemicals, which are carcinogenic and being phased out or litigated against. Like McDonald's and Burger King have a class action lawsuit worth $5 billion right now on their hands due to their wrappers having this stuff. Or they're using a substitute coating like polyethylene, which is obviously plastic. And then it's technically not a sustainable solution. Everyone wants to move away from that. The leading industry product, the leading industry coating for us lasts in the presence of oil and grease for about 30 to 45 minutes before it starts to stain, soak through, and then the food changes flavor and smell and everything as a result of that. And the packaging come apart. With our coating, we guarantee can last a minimum of 7 days. So you're getting an exponential benefit in performance. This isn't just, like double the performance. You're getting tremendous benefit. So those types of coatings that we're developing for the paper industry are what excite me the most right now. One, because it's a huge industry. There's a lot of growth, tons of private equity activity going on in there. But just in general, I think it's a real problem that needs to get solved. And chemical companies need to be held accountable for throwing these carcinogenic chemicals out into our freaking food packaging for, 30, 40 years, and no one said anything about it. And so at this point, we have a viable alternative. Everyone wants to switch to the green and eco-friendly solution until they see the price tag or they see that it doesn't work as well. Well, we take care of that. We provide you a product that actually works. It supersedes performance of what you could expect, and it's eco-friendly and sustainable and all that stuff. You may have to pay a little bit of a premium for it, but that's the benefit that you get with our products.
Earlier in the show, you said something that really resonated with me. I know it did with Josh as well, but you said entrepreneurs solve problems, and you are solving problems. And I remember a conversation you and I had a couple years ago. You said, hey, if you ever have a problem, let me know, because I'd love to think about it and solve it. And do you remember saying that? You may not even remember saying that.
Yeah. No, I do. I say this to people who I genuinely want to get closer to or feel, like I owe something to and I want to help. I probably what I said to you is, what's keeping you up at night and how can I help you solve that?
Yeah. You did. That's exactly what you said.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Love it. David, thank you so much for being on our show. Thank you for all the wisdom that you've bestowed upon us and our listeners. And man, we are really excited for Detrapel. We're really excited for you and everything you're doing to change the world.
Thank you, guys.
Buddy.
Thank you for having me.
And let us know one last time how to follow up with you or learn more about what you do.
Yeah, the easiest way is just to connect with me on social, either Instagram or LinkedIn. It's just my full name, David Zamarin, and that's pretty much it. Or email me. Find my email hunt it, and email me.
Email hunt it.
Yeah.
I love it, buddy. We can't wait to get you back. Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Damn straight. We just got we got to the end of another great show, and everyone listening right now, you're the family and friends. Thanks for staying till the end.
That was so fun. And hey, hit the like, hit subscribe. We're here to serve you guys. That's why we're doing this show. Josh is not paying me. I'm doing this off of my quote unquote sweat equity because we want to make a difference in your life. And then that ripple effect will continue to touch the world.
Hey, amen, brother. Please check us out on capitalhacking.com, all the social media threads. And yes, I know you've probably already sent this episode to one of your best friends. Thank you. We love you. Just go right into your iPhone, hit the plus symbol. We'll talk to you later. See you next week.
Share.